The Smiling Man. There's something wrong with my neighbor. I didn't realize it at first. He seemed normal enough when he moved in last winter. Quiet, kept to himself. The only thing that ever struck me as odd was his smile. He smiled too much, an unsettling, plastered grin, as if someone had frozen his face in that expression. But who was I to judge? People have their quirks. It wasn't until the night I heard the screams that I started to understand. It was a bitterly cold January night. I was lying in bed when a blood-curdling scream pierced through the thin walls. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. It sounded like a woman, and it was coming from next door, the Smiling Man's apartment. The scream was followed by a thud, then silence. I didn't know what to do. Call the police? I waited, straining to hear any more sounds. Nothing. I wanted to believe it was a nightmare, that I had imagined it. But deep down, I knew something terrible had happened. The next morning I saw him, the Smiling Man, standing in the hallway holding a garbage bag. He was grinning as always, but this time, his eyes were different, darker, hollow. He caught me looking and waved. "Morning," he said in that unnervingly cheerful tone. "Hope I didn't wake you last night." I forced a smile and shook my head, but I couldn't stop staring at the garbage bag in his hand. It looked heavy, like something large was inside, dragging against the floor. His eyes followed mine. "Cleaning up a mess," he said, still smiling, his voice low, almost a whisper. Then he turned and walked away. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, but I didn't know what to do. People disappear all the time in this city. I told myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the scream was just a TV show. Maybe the bag was just trash. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I was ready. I stayed up, listening. Around 2 a.m., I heard a muffled cry, followed by a deep, wet, gurgling sound. I crept to the wall, pressing my ear against it. There was a scuffling noise, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. Then silence. My mind raced. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on. I grabbed my phone and texted my friend, telling her I was going to check out the neighbor's apartment, just in case. I walked out into the hallway. The door to his apartment was slightly ajar. I stood there, heart pounding, debating if I should knock. Before I could decide, the door creaked open further. My stomach churned as I peered inside. The place was immaculate, clean to the point of being sterile, except for one thing. In the center of the living room, there was a tarp, stained with something dark, and on top of it, laying lifeless, was a woman. Her body was twisted unnaturally, and her eyes were wide open, frozen in terror. I stumbled back, my throat tightening. That's when I heard the voice behind me. "Don't you just love a clean apartment?" I spun around, and there he was, the Smiling Man, standing in the doorway, blocking my escape. His grin stretched wider than ever, his teeth gleaming under the dim light. But it wasn't just a smile anymore. It was predatory, like he was savoring my fear. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice still calm, as if we were discussing the weather. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. He took a step closer, his eyes glinting with something dark, something monstrous. "I don't like leaving a mess," he whispered, pulling out a knife from behind his back. The blade shimmered under the light, and I realized in that moment that I wasn't going to leave this place alive. I turned and ran, crashing through the door and sprinting down the hall. Behind me, I could hear his footsteps, slow and deliberate. He wasn't running. He didn't need to. He knew he had time. I reached my apartment, slammed the door, and locked it, my chest heaving. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Silence. Then, that voice. "I'll clean up later," he whispered through the crack in the door. "Don't worry, I'm very thorough." I backed away, my heart racing, as I heard his slow footsteps retreating. He wasn't in a hurry. He knew he had all the time in the world. That was a week ago. I've barely slept since then. I called the police, but when they came to check, the smiling man's apartment was spotless. No tarp, no body, no sign of anything wrong. They looked at me like I was crazy. I tried to tell them, to make them believe me. But it was no use now. Every night, I hear him. He paces in his apartment, just on the other side of the wall. Sometimes he stops, and I swear I can hear him breathing, right next to me. He's waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for the perfect time to strike. And every time I close my eyes, I see that smile. Last month, my wife and I bought an old farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place people retire to when they want peace and quiet. It was charming. Rustic wood floors, acres of land, and just enough creeks to remind us of its history. We needed a change of pace, something slower after the chaos of city life. Everything was perfect, or so we thought. There was this one thing, though, something we didn't expect. Every night, the baby monitor would crackle to life, filling the house with a low, static hum. At first, we brushed it off. The house was old. Maybe it was some interference or the wiring acting up. We didn't even own a baby monitor when we moved in. It was left behind by the previous owners in the attic. We found it while cleaning and thought it was cute. A little piece of the house's history, so we left it plugged in as a quirky reminder. The first few nights, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But around midnight, the monitor would come to life, buzzing faintly. It wasn't enough to freak us out. Old electronics can be unpredictable, especially out here in the countryside. But then the sounds started. It was subtle at first. A soft rustling, like fabric shifting or someone moving around quietly. We told ourselves it must be picking up some distant signal from a neighbor's house, though the closest one was miles away. It wasn't long before the rustling turned into something far more unnerving. Whispers, faint, muffled whispers that seemed to be trying to communicate, but the words were too garbled to make out. I remember my wife joking one evening, "Maybe it's the ghost of the last kid who lived here." We laughed, but the laughter was forced. A week later, it escalated. We were lying in bed, just drifting off, when the baby monitor crackled to life again. But this time, instead of the usual static, we heard it. A woman's voice. Soft, gentle, and unmistakably real. She was humming a lullaby, like she was trying to soothe a baby. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My wife sat up in bed, her face pale. She stared at me, waiting for an explanation I didn't have. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. There was no denying it. Someone, or something, was using the monitor to speak. But it didn't make sense. The monitor was in the spare room, the one we hadn't gotten around to using yet, the one with the crib we never put there. The humming continued. Then the voice came again, clearer this time. It was close, like it was just on the other side of the wall. "Shh, don't cry. Mommy's here." We didn't move. My heart raced as the whispering continued, more insistent. I felt like I was paralyzed, trapped in that bed as the voice persisted. "Mommy's here," it said again, soothing but wrong, like someone pretending to be a mother. "What the hell?" I muttered, climbing out of bed. My wife grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "You're not going in there," she hissed. I ignored her. and grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand. I had to see. I needed to know what was going on. With every step toward the spare room, my stomach twisted tighter. The air grew colder, unnaturally so, as though something was draining the warmth from the house. When I reached the door, I hesitated. The handle was ice cold under my palm. The baby monitor's static was louder now, almost like it was calling me in. I took a deep breath and swung the door open. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of the monitor's light. The crib, which we had never put there, was sitting in the middle of the room, empty. My flashlight flickered, its beam weak, barely cutting through the darkness. Then I saw her. In the corner of the room, hunched over, was a figure. A woman. Her back to me, cradling something in her arms. Her hair was long, stringy and matted, falling over her face as she rocked back and forth. She was humming that same lullaby, the one we had heard through the monitor. My legs refused to move. My brain screamed at me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. Then she stopped humming. Slowly, she turned her head toward me. Her face was pale, gaunt, with eyes too big and too dark, sunken into hollow sockets. She didn't blink, just stared at me with a look of pity. Her arms were still cradling the bundle in her lap, and in the dim light, I saw what it was. There was no baby, just a rotted, decayed cloth doll, its face cracked and broken. But she held it like it was real, like it was alive. "Shh," she whispered again, her voice softer now. "You'll wake him." I stumbled back, slamming the door shut behind me. My wife was already standing in the hallway, her eyes wide with terror. "What did you see?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. "But we need to leave. Now." We packed whatever we could carry and left that night. We didn't stop until we reached a motel on the edge of town. I tried to explain what I saw, but no words made sense. Who was she? Why was she there? The next morning, we called the realtor and put the house up for sale. I haven't been back since. But the baby monitor, it still haunts me. Sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I can still hear it crackling faint whispers on the edge of my hearing saying, "Mommy's here." One day in the woods, my friends came up to me last year. Today, now I'm the only left. Now I am planning to go for a little hunt for them. Last year, Jake, Ashley, Amy, Emma, and Josh all went camping and took me, with all of us. Thought it was going to be a fun, relaxing escape from reality. But it was everything but relaxing or an escape. If anything, it did help me escape. It helped me escape from the real life by making me see a lot more creatures we weren't ever meant to see. I feel them stalking, hear them talking. I feel their gaze. I feel the hatred of all of them. This weekend, I plan on taking out everything that hunted us that day. My soul died, seeing all my friends and my girlfriend being ripped apart, limb by limb. I will get revenge. That day we were driving and got to a camping site we set up and started to relax. It was okay for the first few days, but on the fourth day, the forest went silent. None of my friends were creeped out by it, only me. I felt like I was overreacting and I felt a strange pressure on me, yet I was acting fine. Let me say now, no human needs to experience true silence. I know we all say we want it, but when not even the crickets make noise, you feel unease and terrified. After that night, we all woke up and saw our stuff missing. Yet we were glad they did take our stuff instead of us. When I looked at my girlfriend behind her, I saw a creature with long claws, a blood-dripping mouth with rows on rows of teeth. I was staring at what I can only describe as evil. And with its teeth, I knew it wasn't here to play after I saw it. The creature started sprinting at my girlfriend, and before I even knew what happened, it had already ripped her limb from limb, with nothing but her screams filling the air. It dragged her armless corpse away into the forest at a speed I thought it was faster than a speeding car. Blood covered me, my friends, and the floor. My friend wanted to search for her, but I told Jake she's dead, and that we will be as well. My heart was broken. I felt like a failure, but yet I knew if I started to cry, then everyone would start as well. All it ever takes is one to break the many, like a match to gasoline. I loved Ashley, but I knew it was already too late, and all we can do now is survive. We grabbed our keys and started to leave. We left everything except knives and guns we had for wild animals. We weren't even sure if they will kill evil, but we have no choice. We got to the car and saw how smart it was. It slashed our tears and was waiting for us. It wasn't hungry. No, it was doing this for fun. Suddenly, a second larger one appeared right behind us. All my friends froze in fear, whilst my fight or flight kicked in, and I knew they are faster than us. I shot, stabbed, and fought tooth and nail, yet they didn't fight back, just stayed away from me. I heard a loud crack and a scream of pain, followed by one of terror. I tuned around and saw my friend Josh being broken brutally. It wasn't killing him, but it was breaking all his bones one by one while taking its sweet time. It tuned to Emma and through her Ashley's phone. These things were playing with us. It knew of our terror and our love, yet it didn't see Jack sneak up on it and stab it. It had bright neon blue blood. It was angered, and they started mauling Jake. Amy tried to run, but they threw Josh's head at her to knock her over. It spoke in Ashley's voice. You shouldn't have done that. It didn't know the meaning of mercy and took its time killing her off. Then they rushed at Emma, and with one blow severed her head. They looked at me, and both spoke in my friends' voices. You live because you thought, well done, human. They ran away, leaving me there speechless, and now I'm planning on killing them or dying whilst trying. Wish me luck. I will need it. Please, this is my second story. I want advice to write better. I hope I did. Okay,